All right, today I'm going to give you some tips and tricks how to apply caulking and get the perfect bead. So we've got some new vinyl windows that were installed on this house, and we've got to caulk these windows and then repaint over the caulking. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks how to make this look absolutely amazing. One thing you want to start with a good caulking. You got to get something that's going to adhere to new vinyl windows and then adhere to your painted surface or whatever your windows are butted up against. I'm going to be using Tower Sealant's AU1 construction sealant. Absolutely amazing product, for doing something like this. It'll span the gap of actually 2 inches. So it'll span large gaps. It's going to stick to multiple different types of surfaces, and the tool's absolutely amazing. So I'm going to be using what I call a sponge caulking method. I use a painter's sponge, just like this, a caulking sponge. And this is what it looks like, just like this. It's about a 6-inch sponge. It's an open cell sponge, nice and smooth. It's great for keeping your hands wet and for tooling and getting a perfect caulking bead. I'm going to be caulking with my caulking gun right here. This is an ETS 2000 caulking gun. It's a caulking gun I like. And got my Tower Sealants installed. So this is a sponge caulking method, and it's keeping your sponge wet all the time and keeping your hands wet all the time so you can tool your caulking. And what I mean by tooling it, that's what I'm using my fingers. There's a lot of tools out there that you can use to apply a caulking bead without using your hands. But your hands have nerves in them. You can feel what you're doing when you're laying out the caulking bead with some of these things called caulking fingers and these other type of things. You can't feel through what you're actually tooling the caulking bead with. So your hands are always the best option. Caulking sponge, this thing needs to be nice and wet. I do like inside, I like using lukewarm water, and it just keeps my hands warm, and it just works for cleaning the sponge a little bit faster. This sponge should be nice and wet because you want your hands to be wet at all times and clean at all times. You don't want to get any caulking built up on your hands. See, I leave a little bit of water in the sponge. You can see there's a little bit left because I want the sponge to be nice and wet and not dry. So I'm going to wring this thing out. Got my sponge. I got my 2-gallon bucket sitting on a drop cloth so I don't get anything wet on the floor. Now I'm going to begin applying my caulking. I'm going to cut my caulking tube. I typically cut it at a 45-degree angle. I don't want it flat. I like it cut at a 45-degree angle. You don't want it cut too big because you don't want to be applying too much caulking, and you don't want to cut too small because then it's not going to apply enough and fill your gap. So you just got to determine, I got a really small gap around this window. That's what I've cut off right here, and now I'm going to begin applying my caulking. When I apply my caulking, I'm going to lay my 45-degree angle out onto the surface. I want it the 45-degree angle facing into my gap or crack, and then I'm going to begin squeezing. Now, kind of the art and some of the trick about doing this is not applying too much caulking, because then you got a lot to wipe off. If you don't apply enough, it's not going to fill the whole gap, and then it's more likely to crack in the end. But one of the great things about Tower Sealants is it's less likely to crack or separate than any caulking you'll use out there. Tower AU1 sealant. This is a white caulking. It comes in a lot of different colors, but we got white vinyl windows. We've got white trim, but we're going to be repainting this trim after we're done applying it. But typically I'm going to start off in a corner. I'm going to apply a certain amount of caulking. You don't want to apply too much because if it starts to dry and coagulate, it's really hard to tool. Down here it's nice and cool in this basement, so I can apply the caulking on this whole window and begin tooling it. If I was outside, I'd probably only be about half of the window and I'd begin tooling it. But I'm just going to apply a nice bead right here. I'm just going to go slow and steady. I'm going to watch the caulking coming out of my tube into the crack. I'm going to watch that it fills the crack. I'm going to go nice and slow. Keep that your angle, 45-degree angle, flat onto your crack at all times. They come back up, opposite direction. You don't want to go too fast. What people have a tendency to do is go too fast. When you go too fast, you're not filling up the entire crack. So I'm going to continue along, nice and steady, not too much, just like that. So I stop right there. Now I want to wet my hands. My hand already started to dry out. I'm gonna wet my hand, get it nice and wet, fingers nice and wet and clean. I'm gonna lightly press down on it. If I press too much, it's going to smear caulking onto the vinyl window and onto the trim way too far. So I'm gonna be and this is where your finger is so much better than any type of tool you use, because the tool cannot feel how much pressure you're putting. It can't feel the caulking at all, or the sealant. So I'm just nice, light touch on it. And then when I get into my corners, I'm going to what I call tool it. I'm going to continue wetting my finger, wiping the excess off until I get that corner absolutely perfect. Just like that. And that's what it looks like. I'm going to do a little bit more. I'll continue on. All right, so I'm gonna now continue from the other side. I'll give you another look at this. We got kind of a large gap in the corner right here, and then a really small gap down here. So I'm gonna start off putting more caulking. I want that whole thing to be filled up, and then I'll do a little bit less as I go. So I'm gonna be watching my 45-degree angles laid flat into that crack. Now I'm just cruising right along. I'm being very patient, laying my caulking bead out, getting a nice bead. I'm just watching my angle of my caulking tube, making sure that angle is flat. Go back up. I do have some cracks right here when they're installing the window. It caused this to crack down here, so I'm gonna fill that in. Just a nice small bead. Now I'm coming down here. I've got a lot bigger crack. So I'm going to be cruising right along, putting a little bit more in to fill that up. So I'll show you, I'm going to tool this, and I'll show you what it looks like on that big gap right there. So I begin here, just a very light touch. I don't want to press too hard. I'm just trying to smooth out that bead. I'm trying to get it to make a nice contact with the window and a nice contact with the trim. See, I've got a nice bead. There's barely anything on my finger as I'm smoothing it out. I'm constantly wetting my finger. You don't want your hands to get dry at all. Coming down to these corners, it gets a little more tricky. Just wiping it off. Tool it. These corners, I'm going to just continue. Your finger's got to be really, really wet to make that nice and toolable. Just like that. Now I'm going to just continue working this till I get it just the way I want it. So this is what it's going to look like here. Now I can just take my caulking tube. I want to make sure my angle is going to be, wherever my 45-degree angle is going to lay flat on that gap. So if I got to turn my caulking tube to whatever direction, I can get that to be flat. And I'm going to turn it that direction. Now I'm going to begin laying out my bead. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn around and go the opposite direction so you can actually see it on this direction too from the camera. So I'm laying it out, watching it as it fills this crack, watching that I'm not putting too much. I'm watching that I'm making sure it's filling that whole gap. I'm not going too fast. I can stop, continue where I was. Right there. So that's what my bead looks like. Now I'm going to get back. I'm going to make sure my tooling finger is really wet and begin where I left off. It's good. If you press too hard, you're not going to have a super nice bead and it's going to pull too much out. If you don't press enough, it's not going to get a good bond to both edges. Once again, this caulking method, sponge caulking, you just have to be patient. It just takes time if you want it to look really, really good. So I do have a situation here where I need to get a little extra on here to fill up kind of some bumps right there. So I just added a little bit more, wet my finger. I'm going to try to get that to smooth out a bump that was there. Now I just smooth that out, feather it out. Now build it in just a little bit more. I'll get back up here to my corner before it dries. If it starts to dry too much, it's going to start to coagulate and your caulking won't be toolable. So I'm going to clean my sponge. I'm getting a little bit of caulking on here because I don't want anything on my hands. Anything on my hands is going to make it so I don't get a smooth bead. What I like to say is, like, with the new guys, if they start getting caulking all over the hands, it's going to get on the ends of your fingers and stuff, and what we call it is caulking boogers, and it's going to cause your finger pad to not be smooth and not give you a good caulking bead. Another tip is this has always got to be clean. Your 45-degree angle is always got to be clean. Every now and then, if you're caulking a lot, you'll start to get a little tag in on the end of your caulking tube. If you're caulking on a rough surface, if you get that little tag in, that'll kind of like mess up your bead too. So you can just trim that little tag in right off and then begin caulking again. So here we go. Start to fill in this corner. I always want a little bit more in my corners so I can make my corners nice and round. So I'm gonna start laying it out. Don't go too fast. Nice, steady speed. I'm going to come back, tool it. Once again, I can feel the caulking. I can feel the pressure I'm putting on it. So right here, I didn't put enough pressure, so I can go back. So as I re-wet my hand, tool right back over it. I'm going to begin working this corner now. I'm going to get my finger just in the right direction. It's nice and soft, wet finger. Super wet is going to make it look a lot better. Just try to smooth this corner out right here. Every time you touch your caulking, you want to wipe it off your finger. I'm going to put some up in this corner, fill this corner in, begin working down this direction. One thing is you have to be able to see your caulking tube, the angle. You have to be able to see the caulking coming out of your gun in order to get the correct amount of caulking on. Continue to wipe. If you make a mistake, just wipe the caulking as much out as you can with a really wet finger, and then re-caulk it and do it all over again. You have, especially indoors, you do have some working time. Outdoors, it's going to dry and coagulate a lot faster. Just like that window is sponge caulked. Looks really nice. got some pretty big cracks right here. Not big enough to put backer rod in, but one of the reasons why I do like using Tower Tech 2 is it bonds better than any caulking I've ever used. Spans the gap, bigger cracks of any caulking I've ever used, and it tools better than any caulking I've used. So I really like using Tower Tech 2. You know, it's a lifetime warranty caulking, and I use it on all my exterior repaints. Had a lot of success with it, least amount of pops of any caulking I've ever had. Also when you start to get to areas like this that the caulking has been pushed out, it's best to cut it out and to re-caulk it. You don't want that bulge sitting there, so we got a big chunk of caulking right here. We can cut that out. Starting to get borderline where, you know, you'd want some backer rod going in there to fill that. That's a big enough gap that we should stuff backer rod in there. Another spot where expansion and contraction has really pushed out a big bead of caulking. That's better to cut it out. This one is probably small enough that it doesn't need backer rod. And this is where it's better to use a high quality caulking that bonds really well. But if you don't fill that whole crack, it will re-crack again, especially if you use a really cheap caulking. Here's a piece of backer rod right here. Now, you know, if you did fill this up with Tower Tech, and it would actually, you know, bond to both sides, it would expand really well, but if it contracts, it's gonna push out a big bulge of caulking, which is what it looked like before. So it's just best to stuff in some backer rod in there. This will give your caulking some backing. I just take my knife, cut it off at the end, stuff that in there. Now it's not going to take nearly as much caulking either to fill. And your crack is going to have a lot more success, you know, when it comes to expansion and contraction, and especially our conditions here in Idaho. I do like, you know, wearing gloves. People ask me, you get used to wearing them. Caulking, you start to learn it's not easy to learn how to caulk with them on, but once you learn, it's nice because you don't get caulking all over your hands. Keep my hands clean, you know, throughout the day. Always check above doors and windows for cracks. A lot of times you got cracks, can't see down below. I like to caulk the tops of the windows too. You get water coming down, getting behind the windows. A lot of times these windows aren't flashed correctly. This window is getting replaced because they're doing a remodel, so they're pulling this window out. Don't need to caulk that one. All these windows, all these vents, everything looks good over here. Sides of doors looks good. This one spot looks like we need to caulk this. One thing that gets missed a lot is bottoms of door jambs, the first several inches right here. Usually when I'm training guys, this gets missed a lot. That little section down there. Any nail heads that have broken the surface of the siding, I always caulk them too. This house, usually that's just about every one of them. Here's a section of caulking that's really loose. People ask me, do I, you know, cut out all the caulking? We usually don't cut out all the caulking unless it needs to be cut out. This is a section where it's pretty bad shape. So I cut it out, just pull it out with my 2-edge knife. This is a corner board that needs to be re-nailed. I always get rid of the extra caulking on my hand. Like if I had any, just get rid of it on the siding somewhere. You will never see that ever. So a few pointers, like when I'm caulking, you start to get excess built up on your glove. We also caulk all the nail heads on the house. You can't see them as well here because the house is white, but I caulk every single nail head. If I got excess on my gun, pull it off the gun, hit the nail heads. And another thing is when you're wiping your caulking, if the grain's going this way, don't wipe it vertical. If it's grain's horizontal, wipe it horizontal and it'll look just like the grain. It's the same on your fascia. If you wipe it horizontal, the grain's horizontal, it'll match and it'll disappear once you paint the house. You'll never see it. Caulking the vinyl, see where the vinyl meets the trim. There's a crack there also. The nail heads, if you don't seal the nail heads, they eventually, what we do, we call it a volcano. They swell up around the nail head and then you'll see the nail head really bad. And the swelling, you know, is this composite siding swelling up because it's basically just glorified cardboard. So we got staples, Christmas lights. Makes it really hard to roll the bottom of the fascia if you don't remove the Christmas like hooks. So we require the customer to, if they're like cup hooks, we require them to be removed because you can't paint it with them on there.
Underneath the window? What did Chris tell me last time I went to go caulk the window? What was the reason? Should I caulk it?
Don't do it, Luke.
Exposed nail head. Do I caulk this or do I not? What did Chris do? I think I'm gonna caulk it.
Yes, Luke, you should caulk it.
Presto.
What the
To caulk or not to caulk? What did Christopher Barry do? Caulk? No caulk. Caulk? No caulk. Caulk? No caulk. Caulk.
So we're out here today and we're doing a complete resale on a travel trailer right here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're going about doing this reseal. So the reseal, we've got some putty that's been pressing out over time and exposed. It's getting dirty, looking ugly. We've also had the previous owner of this trailer actually put silicone around a lot of the fixtures, around a lot of the windows because there was a leaking problem and it wasn't the right way to seal it. And so I'm having to do some removal of that silicone. So I'm going to be talking about, you know, some of the tools and products we're going to be doing. We're doing a sponge caulking of tower sealants, and the tower sealants I'm using is a product called AU1. We're matching the trailer color. We've got a bronze color of AU1 we're going to be using right here. We've got a white color and then a white, and then we're using also another color that matches really well to this is a stone color. So it's AU1 commercial construction sealant. It adheres really well. It could span large gaps up to 2 inches, but it's a great product for doing a reseal on this. And it's not a silicone. You don't want to use silicone. The silicone exposed to light, sun, dirt, it gets really dirty, looks really ugly over time. Doesn't do a really good job sealing. I'm sponge caulking using a sponge right here, a caulking sponge right here, and just a bucket of water. So this is really important that you have a good sponge for the sponge caulking of this, so you can get a nice clean bead when caulking. Because of the silicone and to actually clean everything prior to doing a sealing, I really like this product right here. It's called Remove, just R-E, move without an E on it. Remove silicone and adhesives. It's a great product for cleaning and getting your surface prepped and ready to seal. You can see we've had to remove lights. There's a silicone behind there. Remove that. So I'm walking around. We'll show you what some of the windows look like. And doing the caulking, I'm using a dripless caulking gun right here. This is the caulking gun I like, and just doing the caulking to start off. The sponge caulking method, it's very important that your tip is cut correctly, not too large, because you don't want to put out too much of the sealant, and you want to be able to put enough out that you're filling these big gaps and cracks. I cut it at a 45-degree angle and just leave a small hole and then begin the caulking process. So this right here, I've actually cut out the sealant on this side. I've already sealed this side, but I'm gonna show you what it looks like to sponge caulk with this AU1 sealant. Now I'm gonna just take clean water. I'm gonna have my sponge extremely wet. Wanna clean my tip. Now, putting on the right amount of sealant is really important. I'm gonna just start off, I'm gonna start pressing my trigger. Watch as it's filling the gap, not too much. If you do too little, you're not going to actually seal the gap. So I'm pressing, just cruising right along my gap and taking your time. This is one of those things, it definitely takes time and it takes patience. You don't want to be in a hurry. I want to make sure I fill my gaps. If you don't fill your gaps, it's going to crack over time. Once I've gone an amount of distance that I'm comfortable with, if it's really hot outside, surface is really hot, it's gonna dry, coagulate really fast. Now this is the process. You gotta have just a light finger, a light touch. I'm gonna be pushing my caulking in. This is gonna be pushing it down in the crack. I'm keeping my finger wet constantly all the time, smoothing this bead out, making it look nice, trying to keep it off the black as much as I can. If I keep wiping, I'm gonna get a nice smooth bead. Just keep working it till it looks super nice. If you mess up, just take your sponge, wipe it out, and redo it. That's what's nice. The AU1 sealant is a water-based construction sealant that bonds amazingly well to all kinds of substrates. It's gonna bond to this very, very well. It's going to withstand the movement of this travel trailer also. Just getting a nice clean bead. I want this to look really, really nice. Before it looked really ugly. Getting it sealed. You can see I'm keeping my finger wet. If I start to get too much caulking on one side of the sponge, I'm going to flip it over. Got to keep your hands clean. Keep it off the black. It's starting to dry and coagulate right there, so I'll work it, get it wet again. Just like that. Now my bead right there is done. I'll continue working right up. Once I get ready to do another run, I want to clean my tip. I want to clean my sponge. I'm constantly cleaning my sponge. It's very critical to getting nice beads of caulking. Now I want to get all this caulking sealant out of this sponge. And I don't want to wring it out. I'm going to wring it out to the point like right around there because I want enough water in this sponge to keep my hands super wet. You can see how much water is actually left in the sponge that I want. So there's water in the sponge still. I want just a little bit in there to keep my hands really, really wet. So I'm gonna get ready, gonna get on a ladder now. So I'm typically going just, about 1.5 feet at a time. Just take your time applying the caulking, watching it fill the crack. Very important that you're getting enough in there to fill that crack. If you go too fast, what happens is it's what we call skim caulking, and you're just putting a skim coat of caulking over, not filling the crack. And it'll eventually crack over time. If you don't keep your fingers wet enough, you're not going to be able to wipe it off the black trim. But you're pushing it in now. I'm getting a good seal on both edges by sponge caulking. So if you don't sponge caulk it, you just put it on and leave it, you're not getting it pushed down in the surface. You're not getting a good bond on both sides. Keep working your finger, keep it wet. Once I get to the point where I worked in where my next point is, I'm just gonna work it smooth. Just like that. Now I'm gonna work up top. Crack is a lot bigger up top here. So I gotta put more in to fill. Always start off with a nice, wet, clean finger. I'm watching and feeling as I'm putting it in, pushing it in with my finger. I can just feel it. I'm not putting very much pressure, just a light amount of pressure. I didn't get enough right here, so I can go back, put some more, work and smooth that out now. Just gonna work, flip my sponge over, clean side of the sponge. Just wipe your finger often. If you get any caulking built up on your hands, it's gonna make it so you can't get a smooth bead of caulking. So you can see hands are extremely clean. Just like that. Now we're gonna do this. We got, you know, a tight seam up top. We got some large gaps on the side that we're gonna wanna fill. It is black up against the tan, so you could choose to do bronze or tan. We're gonna do our tan color, so it's stone right here. Once again, this is an interior exterior sealant, exceptional weather resistant sealant, exceptional adhesion capabilities. Definitely want something that's gonna adhere extremely well on something like this that's got a lot of movement to it when it's driving down the road. So the sides I've got a big gap to fill, and the top is pretty tight. So just a tiny little bead along the top. Sides, I'm getting it down inside there. Come around the bottom. It's a little messy on the bottom there. So now I'll begin where I started, because that's going to be drying fast. The sun is kind of hitting this side, so I'm going to begin smoothing it out, wiping it off the black. Now something like this, may let it dry, come back and do a second coat on it. Just depends on how it looks how well it filled when it's done. So I'm going to try to wipe off get a really wet finger, wipe it off, get a nice line across my black right here. Keep wiping till I get it clean. I get some water on it a little bit with my finger, wet it. It's getting a little dry. A little warm out here, so it's drying pretty fast. I probably should have just did half of it first, but I'm just re-wetting the caulking by keep wiping it here. I do like using cool water, not warm water, because it keeps it wet and smooth, keeps it from coagulating. So now that thing is caulked. Come over here and I'll show you. Now we're going to begin doing some removal. I'll show you what it looks like removing this, what's existing on here. It's kind of like a putty type caulking. So we're doing the removal now. I'll show you what that looks like. I'm using the tool that is working really well. I got multiple tools that I do when I remove caulking, but on this job, the 2-edge knife and their flex putty knife right here with a blade on it right here has been working really well. This is all I've used to do this removal. When I'm removing the putty, I'm just using this edge of the knife and just cutting the putty. The putty is still soft, it's pressing out, but it comes off pretty evenly and smoothly. I'm just cutting it and it'll begin to just peel off just like that. So I'm just cutting it back, that way I can fill the gap. I'm not trying to take all the putty out, because the caulking, the sealant, the AU1 will actually stick to the putty. I'm trying to get it away from the surface where it's pushing out, trying to get it away from the edge right there so I can stick to that edge. So I'm just cutting it away, Just want to be careful not to scratch anything that's not going to get covered with caulking. So just like that, I'm just cutting it out. And the putty comes off, you see, pretty easy. The bad part, like this silicone, here's silicone around the light. It's actually just a mess, and it's hard to get the silicone off. It takes a lot more time and effort. What I'm doing with the lights, I'm just pulling the lights off, and then it's a lot easier to remove the silicone with that light off. So I'm just cutting it back just enough so now I got enough to fill inside there, enough space to fill. Just like that. Now I'm gonna, before I do any of my caulking with my sealant, I'm gonna clean that. I'll show you, I'm gonna remove this light. We'll show you kind of the silicone mess. This is all messy silicone that's attracting dirt over time. Looks really ugly. The AU1's gonna dry and it's not gonna collect dust and dirt. So most of these fixtures are removable, and this is the easiest way to get most of the silicone off. Now this light, gotta break this seal. So now you can see here's my silicone all exposed. A lot of it's just going to peel right off. It doesn't bond very well. And then I'm going to peel it off my light. then the silicone will leave a residue behind, so you think you got it all cleaned off, you still want to use your adhesive remover to remove any residue of that silicone. Otherwise, nothing sticks to silicone. You can't paint silicone, and like your other adhesives, stuff like that will not stick to it. Silicone's some nasty stuff. Really should be only used indoors because of its inherent ability to just collect dust and dirt. So this is the silicone remover. So again, this is the best product I've ever found for removing adhesive silicone residue. So like if you're redoing a bathtub that has silicone, just gonna put some remover there. You gotta make sure you remove it all off this light, because your sealant's going to be sticking from the light to your metal, so plastic to metal. That's one of the great things about this AU1 is it sticks to all kinds of different substrates. You can see there's still a little edge of silicone. You just got to make sure you remove all of it, because once again, nothing's gonna stick to that silicone. This is the hardest part about this whole job, is this silicone mess. When it comes to this side with that putty, it cleans up fast and easy. Want to get rid of any dirt residue, any of the putty that's exposed beyond where your sealant would go. Just work on just scraping that off. Comes off pretty easy. Just be really careful you don't scratch your trailer anywhere where it'd be exposed beyond the sealant. Once I get this cleaned, I'm gonna let this dry about an hour before I do any caulking on it. That's all good to go, ready to seal. Begin. I'll show you some of the windows that we got to deal with next. I'll show you what it looks like to work on one of these windows. So you can see the putty is pushing out, looks pretty ugly. So we're just coming along, knifing it. Then we can just peel it away. And this 2-edge knife works absolutely perfect for this job. I got a 2-edge 5-in-1 also I've been using, but primarily this flex blade right here, the edge of it is sharp enough to do everything I've needed to do. You can see how ugly this side is. The putty's pushing out. It's white, it doesn't match the trailer color. The AU1, you got a lot of different colors, so more than likely they're going to have what you need to match. So get this removal, just kind of like the putting the caulking in. You just want to take your time, not try to go too fast. You don't want to scratch your window. You don't want to scratch your paint, so I'm just being really careful. This is one of those jobs, been working on this several days. It's not going to be a job you're going to get done in a few hours. So you've got to make sure if you're doing any type of resealing job that you bid it correctly. this putty just dries out over time. So eventually, you know, your windows will start leaking, you know, if you don't reseal them. You see this bottom right here, it looks really bad. So all the windows pretty much look like this. We'll show you the after, the front side, how much better it does look. And this putty all built up on the outside serves absolutely no purpose, so it's definitely okay to get rid of it. I mean, somebody might ask too why I'm not using, you know, the knife instead of the blade on here, the knife portion of the two-edged knife, and you know, it's too sharp to run on the metal. You know, it's going to really dig into the metal really bad. This has got a dull enough corner that it's not going to score deep into the metal, and it kind of runs nice and smooth along the metal. Just be careful when you get up to your decals not to damage decals. So I'm going to give you, a quick pointer, when doing this. It's actually the sun's come out. It was really nice and cool earlier in the morning, and it was shaded because of the clouds and stuff. It is now getting hot. The bronze metal work gets pretty hot. The metal does get pretty hot. You got to do shorter runs. I'm doing really short runs, but another thing is to keep the caulking from coagulating too fast, I'm just pre-wetting my surface, and that will get it wet, and it'll actually cool it off too. So I'm going to pre-wet it, and then I'm going to begin applying my caulking. And it's just happening where, it's just what I was noticing is it was coagulating really, really fast, and making it harder to manipulate and work. And one of the nice things about this caulking is its workability, its toolability, what we call, and it tools really, really well. But you got to keep it moist and keep it wet. So just pre-wet your surface. If it's starting to get too hot, try to keep your vehicle or RV or trailer in the shade if possible too. Right, pre-wetting this bronze especially, it makes it so it doesn't dry so fast on the bronze. Wet it with my clean side of my sponge. I begin applying. I'll just continue working right up the corner of the trailer there. All right, so we're gonna be taking off this license plate attachment and this light right here. This is an absolute mess right here with silicone caulking, so we're gonna wanna clean this up. And once again, it's gonna be a lot easier just to remove this thing and clean it up that way instead of trying to cut it, off and cut around it. So we're going to remove the plate cover now. I'm going to see if it'll come off. You can see it, it'll just come off. Silicone just comes off pretty easily. They add some like putty on the sides. I'm not sure what that putty was supposed to do, but now we'll just begin cleaning the silicone off the license plate. It'll just peel right off the light itself. And then I'll clean any residue off. Got a few nuts and bolts that go to this. We want to just set them aside. You can see that here's the silicone. I'm going to leave this putty here. That's where the screws are. And definitely doesn't waterproof or seal it, but get all this silicone off. See how most of it comes off just by picking it off. Just like that. Then I'm going to take my rag and my silicone remover, and we're going to begin cleaning any residue off. It's really important that you clean your surface off, even if there's no silicone. Any dust, residue, anything, oxidation could cause your sealant to not stick very well. See, we got silicone sticking on here really good. Just trying to pick it off with my fingers. Every now and then you're going to get some silicone actually doing its job, sticking really well. So I'm just going to use my knife to cut it off. One final last clean. Make sure you're keeping a clean part of your rag. Just going to put this putty back in place. Reinstall my light. Don't want to over tighten it because you don't want to break this plastic. Now I could begin caulking this. So I'm just going to be using tan. This is up against our tan metal. I'm going to pre-wet it, cool it down because I'm in the sun. Bead around there. Put a little bead on the bottom. Before reinstalling the light cover, just wipe it out. It's pretty dusty inside. It's even got silicone all on that. Let that dry out for a minute. and then we'll reinstall the light. So I'm caulking around all the fixtures. Also, you want to have everything sealed along with the windows. So I'm just working on my fixtures now. Once again, remember, always clean your tip off well. The tip starts to get, it'll start to get a little burr on the end of it right here, and that's going to mess up your caulking bead. It's kind of messing up my caulking bead a little bit. Just going to trim that off. Just like that. That's why it's always good to have a knife with you. Now we're going to work on a window here, show you what it looks like working on this window. It's always good where you can see the caulking you're applying. You want to be able to see it going in the crack. So you want to have it in front of the caulking gun in front of you. If you can't see how much you're applying, you might not be applying enough. You might be applying too much. So somebody recently asked me on one of my social media accounts, why is paint bleeding underneath my tape? And I'm going to discuss and show you why. I've got a product right here. This is Frog Tape Orange. This is a production tape. It's kind of just an everyday tape that you would use, on painting. So this tape itself right here, I'm going to put some on the wall and we're going to paint over it and you're going to see what happens. We're going to be using a product right here. This is a dark blue color right here, a flat paint. Dark blue colors, any type of colors, the darker they are, the thinner they are, and they are a liquid. And a liquid will eventually bleed underneath the tape if you give it enough time. And if the paint is thin enough. White paints, thicker paints are less likely to bleed underneath your tape. But we've got a rough surface right here, and paint more than likely would bleed underneath this because your tape has got to form all up and down all these valleys, peaks and valleys, and stick to it and adhere to it. If it doesn't, paint's eventually going to bleed underneath it. I'm going to show you on a rough surface like this how you can actually stop that by using just a production tape. So I'm going to put some production tape on this wall right here. And then I'm going to show you a method that we use using caulking, clear caulking, and how that actually stops paint from bleeding underneath the tape. And you're going to see what it looks like. Then I'm going to show you another tape right here. This is Frog Tape Green. This is Frog Tape Orange and production tape. Frog tape green is a more expensive tape because there's something unique about it. It has a polymer on the outside of the tape that actually swells when it comes in contact with water or any type of liquid, and water-based paints is a liquid. It swells before the paint actually bleeds underneath the tape. But I'm gonna show you what happens right here with our orange tape first. I'm gonna not caulk one of the tapes, then I'm gonna caulk one of the tapes, and you're gonna see the difference. And I assume you'll probably see a big difference. So I use a clear caulking, and I use Tower sealants. There are caulkings. Tower makes this caulking called a accelerator that's specifically made so you can caulk onto a surface and then you can paint over it immediately. You don't have to wait for it to dry. I use Tower. This is Tower Tech 2. This is a little bit different than accelerator. It does say you have to wait for the caulking to dry, but we've been using this method for, I would say, about 20 years, and we've never had an issue with it as long as we're using any type of paint that has a sheen to it. If you're using a flat paint, the paint might crack a little bit, but Tower Tech 2 clear caulking, it's really thin. We're just going to be leaving a really, really thin bead of caulking down and wiping it off. So what this actually does, I'm going to take and wipe this off, and I'm actually trying to wipe all the caulking off and not leave any behind. And this is actually sealing the edge of that tape. So that's right there. That one's sealed both sides, the other one's not sealed. Now I'm going to show you what happens when I paint that surface. We'll pull the tape off and see what it looks like. Caulked and uncaulked. So there's not caulked right there. Obviously you can see paint because we got all these peaks and valleys. Paint bled underneath that tape all over the place. Now peel off this frog tape right here. Now you can see the difference in why we actually use caulking. You got a little bit of bleeding right there because I didn't get some caulking right there or at the top. And you can see this side right here, a laser sharp line using caulking. So your paint bleeds underneath your tape because it's a liquid. It's finding peaks or valleys to actually seep underneath the tape, and that's the result. So caulk your tape whenever you got rough surfaces and you'll get laser straight lines. Now on any type of smooth surface, if you have a smooth surface, like smooth walls, anything like glass, tile, frog tape green, this tape right here, you don't actually need to caulk your tape. The polymer on this tape will work and without actually caulking it. I'll try it on this wall right here and we'll see on the result without caulking it using frog tape green and see how well it performs. On a wall this rough, I wouldn't expect it to seal 100%, but we'll give it a try. If you make sure you press down on that, there we go, our tape is on. See how well frog tape green performs on this wall here. So without any caulking at all, you can see it got some really straight lines where I actually pushed down on it, nice and tight. I missed the spot right there where I didn't push down, but that's a pretty laser straight line right there, just frog tape and no caulking, frog tape green. So now I'm going to put some frog tape green on the wall and we'll just caulk our frog tape green and you can see the result. So there's a little bit of bleeding. I mean, this is a really rough wall, so I wouldn't expect, frog tape green to 100% seal that. I gotta say, that's pretty amazing on a rough wall like this. But now I take frog tape green, and then I just take a little bit of clear caulking. Put a little bit of clear caulking on here. And this is the method we use anytime we want, stripes on walls. We're trying to split a rounded corner. Anytime you're wanting a laser straight line, you can just, I've got to actually paint it first. Caulk it. Now, I know there's other methods out there. You can actually just pre-wet it. Your tape with a rag, pre-wetting it with water is actually pre-swelling that polymer on the tape, and that will seal the tape. It's not as effective as using caulking. And then there's also a method of actually painting the same color. If I painted white because I wanted white, paint white over the tape, let the white dry, and then paint my dark color over the top of that. The white bleeds underneath, and it's the color that I want it to be, so it pre-seals the tape. And then you paint over the top of that. But the downfall to that method is you can't paint right away. So this method, I can caulk it and I can paint right away, because I can't paint right away with the other method because you have to wait for the white paint to dry. So I know there are some painters out there that have explained that on some of my social media accounts, and that's how I used to paint and try to get laser straight lines before I discovered this method right here. So I'll pull it off. And there is a laser straight line. So now I'm comparing this with the orange and the frog tape green. If you're really particular about your lines, the frog tape green even had a straighter line than the frog tape orange, even though that was pretty dang good. That's a production tape. This is a premium tape with a polymer on the outside. And so that's a little bit of why paint is bleeding underneath your tape and how to resolve that. So I'm going to show you the final method, how what it actually looks like. And this is the method I used to use, I don't know, about 20 years ago when it came to getting straight lines, and it was painting the color that's underneath the tape over the top of the tape, and it'll bleed underneath the tape and seal those edges. And then you go over the top of it with whatever color you're going to, and then pull your tape and you get a laser straight line. What that looks like, I'm going to take my tape, mask on the wall, and then underneath it is the white color. That's the color I want to stay. Then I'm gonna just take, roll over the top of that white, and that's going to seal the edge if the paint is thick enough. And this method is typically going to turn out and have a few spots bleed in it and stuff, because if your peaks and valleys are too high for the paint to actually seal it, there's more viscosity to your caulking. It's a lot thicker. It's going to seal larger gaps. Now I have to wait for this to dry in order to paint my other color over the top of it for obvious reasons, because we don't want to mix the two colors together. The other methods, you put your caulking on and you actually apply your caulking before, or you apply your paint before the caulking dries, and then before the caulking and the paint dries, you pull your tape and you'll have this laser straight line. This method right here, when you apply your white paint, you're having paint that's bridging over the top of your tape to your wall. That dries and you put your other tape over the top of it. When you pull your tape, you could get peeling, what we call bridging or shark's teeth, and it'll peel from your tape to the wall, and it'll peel it right off the wall or whatever surface you're painting on. This method, you can have the same thing, but that's why we always pull our tape before the caulking dries and before the paint dries, so you don't get any of that bridging, because the caulking will bridge and the paint will bridge. So you don't want your caulking to dry, nor do you want your paint to dry. So I got on my last tape line right there, and we've painted the white on. It's been, probably 30 minutes, maybe 30, 45 minutes, and I'm gonna paint over it. You can already see the tape is lifted up on some of the edges. So this method is, never as foolproof as caulking green frog tape, but we'll just look and see how it is. I'll clean it out. See, not too bad. I mean, I painted it all the way down, but it bled pretty bad on the bottom, but fairly straight and stuff. But you can see why, if you really needed a perfectly straight line, painting the other color over the top, is not as great of a method as doing the frog tape method. But I did this method for years and years. Just gotta be very particular about pressing your tape down, really good and tight before you paint over the top of it with your underlying color. Now, I'll give you, kind of one last tip. If you don't have access to caulking, if you don't want to use caulking, if that's a little intimidating to you, if you don't want to use this method, just use frog tape green. And if you're really particular about pressing your tape down with your fingers, the pads of your fingers, I'm going to press that down really good, really tight. It's going to mold to those peaks and valleys. There's a good chance, if you're using frog tape green or frog tape blue. Frog tape blue and frog tape yellow also have the same polymer on the outside of the tape. Frog tape yellow is for delicate surfaces. Frog tape blue is the same as a green, but it comes in multi-packs, so it's cheaper because you're not buying it individually. Now I'll show you, if you're really particular about pressing and using your fingers to press, what this will look like. Peel this off here. Just let frog tape do the magic. So you see, I was pretty particular. I had some bleeding spots right there. That's pretty dang impressive for frog tape without any caulking right there. But if I had to have this laser straight line, I'm gonna have to fix that right there, and that's gonna take me a little bit of time to fix those couple spots versus something like that's laser sharp. So there you have it, some tips, tricks, why paint is actually bleeding underneath your tape, and how to resolve it using frog tape or caulking over your tape. We'll begin the caulking. I've got a couple options. I typically caulk with either Tower Tech 2 Clear, or I'll use Tower Accelerator. Tower Accelerator, it's a 50-year caulking that was actually designed to be painted over, brush and rolled over it instantly. You don't have to wait any period of time. Over flat paints, it won't crack either, painting on it right away. We're using a matte paint right here. I've tested, I'm doing some testing with this product. It's Bear Dynasty, so I've used Tower, the Clear, because I like the Clear better because the consistency is a lot thinner. It's easy to work with. It's not good for filling gaps, but if I don't have any gaps to fill when I'm doing my cut-ins, I'm gonna always side towards using a clear caulking because it's just thinner, easy to work with, dries slower also. But if you're using flat paints, I would highly recommend Tower Accelerator because it's not gonna crack. Flat paints are notorious for cracking over the top of caulking, but being the Bear's high-end paint, top line paint, we're gonna experiment with it on that wall and see how it performs. I'm gonna be using Tower Accelerator on the inside of this tight space right here, and we're gonna see the difference between the two. But once again, a white caulking's got more pigment in it, more solids. It's heavier bodied and dries a little bit faster. Don't need to be worrying about caulking inside here. It's just gonna be caulking right here. and these two sides right here. And that way I get perfectly straight lines on my tape using this super dark color, accent color. I don't want any type of bleeding. It's really thin. It could bleed on any type of imperfection on your tape, so you definitely want to caulk it. So we're putting on small, tiny bead of caulk. I'm going to be working just this one section right here because, say, the white caulking dries faster, especially a tower accelerator. It dries quite a bit faster than a clear caulking. So I want to get it on, and then I'll begin painting right over it right away. Just a handy little tip: if things are drying too fast for you, you'll turn down your heat, open up a window, anything to cool it off. It's really hot in here, and I opened up 2 windows. It's really cold outside to cool it off in here, to give me a little more working time with my paint and my caulking. Now this wall is done. I'm just gonna pull my masking now before this dries. You can see with caulking accelerator, we've got perfectly straight line right there. You pull your tape while the paint is wet, your tape is less likely to splinter too versus when the paint dries. I've got this cutting to do right here, so power accelerator. Small, tiny bead. Once again, all this is doing is really wetting the edge of the tape and creating a nice seal. The white caulking is drier than the clear, so you don't have as much working time. I can feel it's like drying really fast. It's partly why you can paint over it right away.